My name is Abigail Hamilton, but those who truly knew me called me Abby. I'd spent my whole life building walls, not physical barriers, but emotional fortifications that shielded me from hurt, betrayal, and disappointment. And yet, none of those carefully crafted defenses could prepare me for the news I received that chilly March afternoon. My childhood home was never just a house. It was a keeper of secrets, a silent witness to whispered dreams and muffled sobs, a sanctuary through years of turbulent family storms. The house sat nestled in the heart of a quiet New England town, its white wooden panels aged gracefully, each window etched with memories I cherished dearly. I could close my eyes and still hear my mother's laughter echoing from the kitchen, smell my father's pipe tobacco drifting lazily through the air, and feel the warmth of our old fireplace crackling on long winter evenings. That house had been more than wood and nails. It was part of me, a cornerstone of my identity, rooted deeply in generations past. But today, as I sat quietly in my expansive home office, overlooking the bustling streets of downtown Boston, my assistant Lydia hesitantly entered, carrying a piece of news she clearly dreaded delivering. "Abby," Lydia started gently, her voice cautious, "I think you should sit down." I smiled wearily, setting down my pen. Lydia was young, competent, and empathetic beyond her years, but rarely had I seen her this tense. "I'm already seated, dear. Whatever it is, surely it can't be as bad as you fear." Her hesitation made the hair on my neck stand up, my intuition already spiraling into silent panic. "Your childhood home. It's been sold." At first, I laughed. Nervous, incredulous laughter. "Impossible, Lydia. There must be a mistake. I own that house. My children know how much it means to me." Her eyes brimmed with apology, sadness flickering across her features. "Thomas called earlier, Abby. He said they finalized the sale yesterday. It's already done." The reality struck swiftly, robbing my breath, my heart pounding against my ribcage. "Thomas did this? Olivia too?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, choked with disbelief. She nodded, her expression confirming my worst fears. My children, the very souls I'd nurtured, the young lives I'd cradled in arms that had once been stronger, steadier, had done this without telling me. How could they? Was it indifference, greed, or something deeper and darker? As Lydia silently excused herself, leaving me to grapple with this new reality, my memories surged violently forward. Each creak of those old stairs, every chipped paint spot on the porch, even the lingering scent of roses in the garden suddenly felt unreachable, stolen from me without mercy. My children, Thomas and Olivia, had grown up privileged, perhaps even entitled. They had rarely seen beyond their own immediate desires, comfortably sheltered by my relentless hard work and sacrifice. Thomas, confident and calculating, had always had an edge, something unreadable beneath his charm. Olivia, quieter, more introspective, carried an enigmatic melancholy, often overshadowed by her brother's ambitions. I'd always believed family was my highest achievement, my legacy. Perhaps that had been my gravest mistake. Somewhere, amidst the careful crafting of a life that appeared perfect from the outside, I had neglected something vital, the very bonds of trust and loyalty I presumed unbreakable. My mind raced through fragments of conversations, searching desperately for clues, missed signals, anything that could explain this cold betrayal. But what explanation could possibly soothe this sting? They knew, how deeply they must have known, that selling that house was akin to tearing out my heart and casting it aside. Slowly, grief gave way to another emotion, something rawer, more potent. Anger. Anger at them, anger at myself, anger at a lifetime of unspoken resentments simmering beneath our polished family veneer. I rose, my body trembling, and approached the grand window overlooking the city. Boston stretched before me, a beautiful illusion of control, success, and status. Yet at that moment, the sprawling city felt as empty as my heart. This betrayal, profound and personal, was no mere misstep or oversight. It was calculated, intentional. It was a message clearer than words ever spoken. My feelings, my legacy, had somehow ceased to matter. Standing there, bathed in the dying sunlight, I vowed silently, fiercely, to reclaim what had been unjustly taken from me. Not merely a house, but my dignity, my sense of self. Thomas and Olivia had miscalculated gravely, assuming the depth of a mother's love would absorb any hurt, forgive any transgression. But love, when twisted by betrayal, becomes a dangerous force, a force I felt surging within me, compelling, commanding. My children had chosen their path clearly, decisively. Now it was my turn. If they could sell off my memories, my foundation without a whisper of remorse, perhaps it was time they learned the bitter taste of loss themselves. As evening draped its shadows across my office, darkness matched the weight settling within me. My children had dealt their hand. Now, it was my turn to play mine. I stood frozen in the elegant foyer of Olivia's spacious home, my heart thundering so loud in my chest that I worried she could hear it from the living room. Every breath felt heavier than the last, and the envelope trembling in my hand was a cruel betrayal written in legal jargon I refused to fully comprehend. "Mom, you okay?" Olivia's voice carried softly, concern threading gently through her words. I looked up, forcing a calmness I didn't feel. My daughter, so poised and self-assured, sat comfortably next to her brother Thomas, whose casual indifference to my obvious distress felt as sharp as a slap. They exchanged quick glances, silent messages passing between them, a language they'd cultivated without me. "No, Olivia, I'm not okay," I finally said, words escaping my tightened throat with bitterness. My voice echoed slightly, bouncing off the cold marble floors, too polished, too sterile. Like my children's hearts, I thought darkly. "I received an interesting letter today." Thomas leaned forward, elbows resting easily on his knees, fingertips steepled in thought. "Let me guess. You found out about the house?" A sharp inhale betrayed my controlled exterior. "You both knew I'd find out eventually. Did you think I wouldn't care?" "Mom, it wasn't meant to hurt you," Olivia rushed to explain, her expression suddenly earnest, pleading. Her eyes, always mirrors of my own, now glistened with anxiety, begging me silently to understand. "It was practical. You hardly visited the house, and upkeep was expensive." My throat tightened painfully. "Practical? Do either of you even know what that house meant to me?" Thomas sighed heavily, his tone flat, practical as ever. "Mom, sentimentality doesn't pay property taxes. It was deteriorating, a burden on you. Selling it made sense." "Burden?" I laughed bitterly, sharp enough to startle Olivia. "You don't get to decide what's a burden for me. My memories, your grandparents' memories, lived in that house. Your father and I spent our first married years there, and you threw it all away without even telling me." "We didn't throw anything away," Thomas argued firmly. "We secured your financial future so you wouldn't need to worry. Isn't that what Dad would have wanted?" At the mention of their father, my chest tightened even further. John had always prioritized security, but never at the expense of our past, of our hearts. I looked away, swallowing hard against the bitter tide of betrayal. "Your father would never have made such a decision without me." Olivia shifted uncomfortably. Her voice softened. "We genuinely thought you'd appreciate less financial stress, Mom. I wish you could see it from our perspective." "I wish you'd bothered to even ask for mine," I snapped back, words sharper than I'd intended. Olivia flinched, and Thomas stood abruptly, frustration flashing through his carefully maintained composure. "Mom, let's not dramatize this more than necessary," he snapped. "The house was sold. The funds were transferred directly into your account. Move on." I blinked, startled by his cold dismissal. "Move on?" My voice shook, anger blending dangerously with hurt. "I've spent my entire life building something solid, meaningful, something to pass down, and you're telling me it doesn't matter? That I don't matter? Mom, that's not—" Olivia tried, desperate to soften the blow, but Thomas's interruption sliced through her attempt. "We're adults. We made an adult decision. Maybe it's time you trust our judgment instead of clinging to nostalgia." The silence following his words was thick, oppressive. For the first time, I looked at my children clearly, not as extensions of myself, but as independent entities who'd grown apart from everything I believed I'd taught them. The bitter realization left a hollow ache inside my chest. "You're right," I finally whispered. "You're adults, and perhaps I've given you both too much for too long." "Mom, don't say it like that," Olivia pleaded gently, reaching out instinctively as I stepped back, suddenly aware of how much I needed distance. "We never meant—" "Intention doesn't erase impact, Olivia," I said softly. "Your practical decision stripped me of my dignity, my memories. all without a word. Did I ever raise either of you to be so indifferent to others' feelings? Thomas's jaw tightened visibly. Mom, this isn't fair. What's fair, Thomas? My voice rose despite my efforts, tension cracking through my control. I spent my entire life putting you two first, sacrificed dreams, ambitions, all to ensure your happiness, your future. Yet neither of you hesitated to sacrifice mine for convenience. You speak of fairness? The weight of my words lingered, oppressive and heavy. Olivia's expression shattered into quiet shame, while Thomas maintained a stony silence, eyes dark and resentful. A line had clearly been drawn, one I'd never imagined could exist within my own family. I can't continue this conversation, I whispered finally, exhaustion seeping through every syllable. Not now. Turning slowly, I walked to the door, every step heavier than the last. As I grasped the handle, Olivia's voice wavered through the quiet space behind me. Mom, please, don't leave it like this. I turned, looking at my daughter, my beautiful, complicated daughter, and saw something broken reflected back at me. My chest ached, desperately longing to comfort her, to bridge the growing divide. But my pride, my pain restrained me. Maybe you should have thought of that before you signed away my history, I whispered back, leaving the house and the remnants of trust shattered behind me. I sat silently in my car, trembling fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly, watching as darkness settled over Olivia's home, a place that had never felt less welcoming. The realization that the children I'd nurtured had grown into adults capable of wounding me deeply felt like drowning. Each breath stung, accompanied by bitter thoughts. Had I spoiled them, failed them, or simply overlooked their capacity for cruelty? And amidst the storm of my thoughts, an idea began forming, quiet but fierce. If Thomas and Olivia could so effortlessly trade my history for practicality, perhaps it was time they truly experienced consequences for their own careless disregard. The family business, a company I'd painstakingly built alongside their father, whose memory they'd used as justification for betrayal, was ripe for my own practical decision-making. My children had treated my past as disposable. Perhaps their futures deserved similar treatment. With sudden clarity and a chill of quiet resolve, I pulled out my phone, calling my lawyer, heart racing with determination as fierce as any I'd ever known. Abigail? He sounded surprised, aware of my usual reticence toward impulsivity. I need you to prepare documents for selling Thomas and Olivia's shares in the company, I said steadily, voice stronger than I felt. There was a pause. Are you certain? I took a deep breath, conviction hardening into steel. Absolutely. It's time they understood the real cost of their practical choices. I ended the call and leaned back, heart thumping in fearful anticipation, yet surprisingly calm. Thomas and Olivia believed they'd secured a future without my consent. They were about to learn how deeply mistaken they'd been. Growing up, I learned early that my worth was tethered to the roles I played: daughter, wife, mother. My earliest memories are filled with glimpses of my mother, Eleanor, standing quietly behind my father, Richard, always 2 steps behind, a shadow silently absorbing his expectations. Her voice was gentle and reassuring, but rarely heard above a whisper whenever he was around. Our home, that very house my children casually discarded, was more than bricks and beams. It was a living testament to a legacy of quiet compliance and subtle resentments. It was in the modest kitchen, with its pale yellow walls, that I first heard the message that would haunt me for decades. My mother, kneading dough gently but firmly, her movements controlled yet submissive, looked down at me and whispered words I never forgot. A woman's strength lies in keeping peace, Abigail. Be steady, be supportive, and never overshadow the man who protects you. Her advice was not malicious. It came from love wrapped tightly in generations of obedience. But as a child, I couldn't understand the cost of such submission, couldn't comprehend the depth of pain hidden behind her weary eyes. Father ruled our house with an unspoken authority, not through fists or yelling, but through expectations that seeped silently into every corner. He was respected, accomplished, and demanding. The family revolved around him. Eleanor was the moon reflecting his light, never daring to shine on her own. At 16, I expressed a desire to study law, believing passionately that I could become someone who fought for justice, someone strong. Father laughed gently, dismissively, as if I'd suggested something absurdly amusing. Sweetheart, he said, shaking his head gently, why waste your energy on something so demanding? You'll marry well, have children, and be happy without burdening yourself. I felt the words sharply, but swallowed the pain and let my dreams settle quietly beneath a facade of acceptance. My mother watched silently, her gaze resigned, understanding the silent rules of our household. That day, I learned silence, learned to absorb pain without protest. And so, when I married John at 21, I followed the rules of the women before me. Supportive, patient, never outshining him despite my innate capabilities. John was kind, caring, but traditional. Our roles felt natural because they mirrored everything I knew. He pursued his dreams. I supported them. He achieved success. I celebrated quietly behind him, smiling, proud yet quietly shrinking my own desires down until they no longer hurt me with their silence. Then motherhood arrived, transforming my quiet surrender into something purposeful, meaningful. Thomas and Olivia became my entire world. Every dream I'd once silently nurtured, I channeled into them. They became my identity, my measure of worth. I watched them flourish, believing deeply that their successes were mine as well. Yet as the years wore on, I unknowingly repeated my mother's patterns. I taught Olivia the same subtle lesson, that her voice mattered less, her comfort lay in pleasing others, smoothing edges, accommodating the ambitions of others first. With Thomas, I unconsciously recreated my father's dynamics, granting him confidence and entitlement he perhaps hadn't entirely earned. These realizations cut through me now, harsh and raw, as I sat alone in my quiet home, the emptiness around me echoing loudly. Had I betrayed Olivia, unknowingly preparing her to accept less? Had I encouraged Thomas to feel entitled to decide what was best for everyone, regardless of their feelings? Each reflection deepened the ache of realization. The generational trauma I'd inherited had seamlessly slipped into the next generation. My sacrifices, I once proudly believed, were signs of strength. Now they mocked me from the mirrors of my children's choices. They'd learned precisely what I'd modeled: practicality above emotions, strength through suppression, value defined by external validation. A vivid memory surfaced suddenly. Olivia, barely 15, desperately wanting to join the debate club at school. I discouraged her, softly yet firmly. Debate can be confrontational, I advised gently. You don't want people thinking you're aggressive or difficult, Olivia. There are plenty of quieter ways to excel. She'd looked at me then, eyes clouded with confusion and disappointment, but ultimately obeyed without protest. I hadn't understood then what I was truly teaching her, that her voice, her passions, were negotiable in pursuit of peace and acceptance. My heart sank deeper, recalling the countless moments I gently guided her away from anything too assertive, too ambitious. I'd unintentionally woven my own internalized misogyny into her very identity, subtly teaching her to diminish herself, just as my mother had taught me. And Thomas, confident and assertive, watched me shrink myself repeatedly for the comfort of the men around me. He internalized that dynamic, assuming authority easily, effortlessly, because he never saw it challenged. Now I'd suffered directly from the power I'd unknowingly handed him. My cherished memories discarded simply because he deemed them inconvenient. Sitting in this quiet, suffocating loneliness, the burden of generational regret pressed heavily upon me. My mother's whispers echoed in my ears, bitter now instead of comforting. Be steady, Abigail. Keep peace. Peace had brought me here, to isolation, betrayal, and deep-rooted resentment. Peace had silenced me, erased me, and now threatened Olivia's future. I felt an overwhelming urgency rise within me, fueled by the bitterness of my own complicity. The cycle had to stop. I had to break the patterns of quiet submission that had consumed generations of women in my family. The thought terrified and invigorated me simultaneously. Could I find my voice now, after decades of quiet compliance? Was it too late to undo the damage I'd unknowingly inflicted? My fingers brushed a photograph on my bedside table. My mother's gentle smile, eyes tired yet loving, captured forever in quiet resignation. I'm sorry, I whispered, feeling deeply connected yet profoundly sad. I know you did the best you could, but it's not enough anymore. I'd sacrificed dreams, ambitions, and independence, believing I was creating safety, harmony, and love. Instead, I'd nurtured resentment and entitlement, passing down an emotional inheritance far heavier than the home my children had sold without remorse. For Olivia, for myself, even for Eleanor, whose silence had been a survival mechanism, I needed to reclaim the voice I'd silenced too long. It was time to acknowledge the harm caused by my internalized belief that my worth depended on my quiet sacrifice. My children, shaped by my unconscious choices, would now feel the repercussions. They needed to understand the weight of choices made in silence. The quiet rebellion forming within me felt unfamiliar, yet necessary. Every breath grew stronger, more defiant, as I began dismantling the beliefs that had imprisoned me emotionally. Breaking free felt like stepping into unknown territory, daunting, yet empowering. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe acknowledging my complicity was the first true step toward healing. Maybe the house, my childhood home, was symbolic, not of loss, but of freedom from expectations, from silenced dreams, and from generational trauma. With each painful revelation, I resolved to rewrite our legacy, determined to end the pattern of silent submission and reclaim my voice, not just for myself, but for every woman silenced by tradition, fear, and misguided love. And for the first time, I felt something stir beneath the pain, a spark of hope, tentative yet powerful, quietly promising the courage to finally break free. The boardroom felt colder today, or perhaps it was just my conscience, weighing heavy with a clarity I'd never fully embraced before. Sitting alone at the head of the polished mahogany table, documents neatly stacked before me, I waited for Thomas and Olivia to arrive. Every breath felt like a preparation for battle, my heart pulsing with a tension that filled every corner of the silent space. The glass doors swung open abruptly, Thomas entering first, his expression a tightly controlled mask of irritation. Olivia followed more cautiously, her eyes already shadowed by uncertainty. Their glances quickly settled on the thick stack of legal papers in front of me. "Sit down, please," I said softly, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. Thomas immediately obeyed, posture rigid, eyes narrowing suspiciously. Olivia lingered, uncertainty clouding her delicate features, before finally settling reluctantly beside him. "What's this about, Mom?" Thomas questioned, voice edged with impatience. "Another lecture about family values?" "No," I responded simply, my tone deliberately even. "It's about your future, both of you. Or rather, your share of it in this business." Thomas's brows knitted, suspicion deepening in his eyes. Olivia sat forward slightly, tension visible in every rigid line of her body. "What exactly do you mean?" she asked, voice cautious. "I've sold your shares," I announced, words dropping like stones in still water. The ensuing silence was deafening, charged with stunned disbelief. "You did what?" Thomas's voice emerged first, dangerously low, his gaze flaring with anger and disbelief. Olivia's reaction was quieter, shock bleeding openly into betrayal as her eyes filled with tears she desperately fought to hold back. "You heard me correctly," I repeated firmly, my voice never wavering. "I've sold your shares. Consider it a practical decision." "Practical?" Thomas shot to his feet, fists clenched. His eyes flashed, fury barely contained. "You accuse us of betrayal, and this is how you respond? With revenge?" "Call it whatever you'd like," I answered coolly, steeling my voice against the ache growing within my chest. "But when you sold my past, you showed me exactly how little sentimentality matters to this family. This business was mine and your father's dream, just like that house held all of mine. You didn't hesitate to discard what mattered to me. Why should I hesitate with what matters to you?" Thomas slammed his hand violently on the table, the sound echoing sharply. "This is nothing like selling a decrepit old house. This is sabotage, Mom. Emotional manipulation." I met his glare evenly, refusing to let his anger diminish my resolve. "And what exactly do you think selling my childhood home without so much as consulting me was? Thomas? Compassion?" His jaw tightened further, frustration etched deeply in his face. "We did what was best for you financially. You acted out of spite." "Financial security?" I scoffed bitterly, shaking my head. "Convenient excuse for erasing my memories. Maybe losing control of your legacy will teach you a thing or two about consequences." Olivia's voice finally cracked through the hostility, trembling softly. "Mom, did you even stop to consider how this affects us?" I turned gently towards her, the hurt shimmering in her eyes, stinging deeper than Thomas's rage. "Did you?" I whispered softly. Did either of you consider what selling that house would do to me? Her silence was painful, her guilt evident in every trembling breath. Thomas shook his head sharply, unwilling to relent. This isn't justice, it's emotional blackmail. You're punishing us for something you refused to communicate clearly. You don't get to rewrite history, Thomas, I responded sharply, my tone edged with bitter truth. You made choices, knowing they'd hurt me. I'm making choices knowing they'll hurt you. The only difference is, mine aren't hidden behind lies. You've crossed a line, he warned darkly, his voice dangerously controlled. There's no going back from this. The line was crossed long ago, I answered, my heart hammering despite my calm exterior. This was simply the inevitable result of decisions you both made. Thomas turned abruptly, pacing angrily before rounding again to face me. You've always preached family loyalty, Mom. Was all that talk meaningless? Loyalty? I questioned bitterly. Loyalty means nothing without mutual respect. You've both consistently shown me that my desires and feelings were disposable. Loyalty doesn't survive betrayal. Olivia shook visibly, a tear finally slipping silently down her cheek. Mom, we hurt you. We see that now. But how is hurting us the solution? My chest tightened painfully, grief intermingling with the anger I desperately maintained. Because nothing else seemed capable of making you understand the depth of my pain. Perhaps this will. Thomas stared coldly, a look of disgust crossing his features. This won't end how you think it will, Mom. You'll regret this. I already regret many things, Thomas, I replied steadily, holding his gaze unflinchingly. Mostly the sacrifices I made for children who didn't appreciate them. But this choice isn't one of them. He stepped back, the distance between us widening physically, mirroring the emotional gap that now felt insurmountable. Olivia rose shakily beside him, her gaze pleading, filled with unspoken hurt. Thomas spoke once more coldly, dismissively. Congratulations! You've ensured our family will never recover. I wasn't the one who destroyed it, I replied, voice barely audible but painfully clear. The heavy silence engulfed us again, broken only when Thomas turned sharply, storming from the boardroom. Olivia hesitated, gaze filled with sorrow, regret, confusion. I never meant for this, she whispered, voice trembling. I know, I whispered gently, my own voice cracking. But intention matters less than impact, Olivia. I had to learn that, painfully. Maybe you both needed that lesson too. She left quietly, the door closing softly, a haunting echo of finality filling the emptiness she left behind. I sank into my chair, exhaustion crashing through the carefully maintained facade. Tears I'd restrained now flowed freely, hot and silent. The grief, anger, and resentment I'd managed so carefully erupted, shaking my composure until nothing remained but painful clarity. The line I'd drawn today felt as irrevocable as Thomas's warning promised it would be. Yet amid my sorrow, a strange sense of vindication emerged, a bitter, uncomfortable justice. They'd tasted briefly the helplessness I'd felt, and perhaps that was the only way to finally break free from the toxic patterns binding us all. Suddenly, a soft chime interrupted my thoughts. Wiping my eyes roughly, I glanced at my phone, noticing a notification from the company's financial department. Curiosity pulled at me, and as I opened the email, confusion and dread mingled within me. My breath caught sharply, eyes widening in shock as I read details of suspicious transactions linked to Thomas. Large, inexplicable amounts of company funds diverted quietly. My pulse quickened, anger battling disbelief. The betrayal ran deeper than I ever imagined. Thomas, my son, had been secretly embezzling from our family legacy. In that moment, the moral certainty of my decision blurred. Suddenly, the lines I'd drawn weren't as clear as before. Thomas's betrayal complicated everything, challenging my righteous anger and shifting the very foundation beneath my feet. As I stared numbly at the damning numbers, dread settled deeply in my chest. This conflict, I realized with chilling certainty, was only beginning. Sitting alone in my quiet living room, bathed in the dim, melancholy glow of a single lamp, memories began to unravel in my mind. Soft, persistent, undeniable. Each recollection came as a painful whisper, laying bare wounds I'd never fully recognized. For years I had dismissed small slights, subtle dismissals, believing them trivial compared to overt cruelty. Yet now clarity sharpened every seemingly minor moment, exposing patterns I'd overlooked far too long. One memory surfaced vividly. Thomas's 30th birthday only a few years ago. I'd spent days preparing a dinner at my house, carefully selecting his favorite dishes, setting a perfect table, candles, fresh flowers, each detail crafted with painstaking love. I waited eagerly, checking my phone repeatedly as the time ticked past. When Thomas finally called, his voice carried the careless ease of someone oblivious to disappointment. "Mom, sorry, work ran late, can't make it," he'd said lightly, barely pausing long enough to hear my response. My throat tightened with silent hurt, yet I quickly masked it behind a cheerful tone. "Of course, Thomas. Work comes first. Next time." Next time never came. Neither did an apology. I remembered Olivia's wedding, a beautiful outdoor ceremony I'd helped plan meticulously. Yet, as I sat proudly in the front row, Olivia delivered a speech thanking friends, colleagues, even casual acquaintances. My heart sank gradually as my name remained unspoken. Later, when I quietly mentioned it, her response was dismissive. "Oh, Mom, you know I appreciate you. Don't make it about yourself." Her words stung deeply. A quiet blade slicing my worth into fragments I hastily tried to piece back together. Again, I swallowed hurt quietly, unwilling to disrupt her joy. The memories kept coming, relentless. A Christmas morning spent alone because Thomas and Olivia had spontaneously traveled together without inviting me, casually texting pictures of their holiday adventures. The message was clear, though never explicitly stated. I was peripheral, convenient when needed, disposable otherwise. A sharper memory pierced me then. It was subtle, but its weight crushed me now with painful clarity. Just weeks after John passed, grief still raw, I'd reached out to Olivia, desperate for comfort, a simple presence beside me. "I'm sorry, Mom. It's been exhausting dealing with the estate. Can't we talk later?" Her exhaustion mattered more than my grieving heart, and I'd accepted it silently, guilt-ridden for asking too much. Each subtle rejection, each quietly dismissed feeling, accumulated silently into an emotional weight I'd carried alone. My children's neglect wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, insidious, persistent, each act small enough to rationalize, each moment brushed aside, yet devastatingly impactful. They had mastered the art of minimizing my needs, my presence, my voice, without ever raising theirs. The reality struck me brutally. This subtle emotional abuse had become my normal. I had unknowingly permitted it, trained by generations of quiet submission to accept less, to shrink my expectations until they were barely recognizable. Anger flared through me, sharp and unfamiliar, tangled with grief for the years I'd spent silenced, dismissed, minimized by those I'd loved most fiercely. Yet beneath my growing clarity, a painful truth emerged. I wasn't purely a victim. My own voice had inflicted subtle wounds shaped by the emotional distance I learned from childhood. I recognized my complicity clearly now, patterns inherited, perpetuated unconsciously, emotionally harsh lessons passed down to my children. I recalled vividly Olivia's tearful distress after losing her first job. Rather than comforting her gently, I'd offered practicality, unintentionally dismissing her pain. "Stop crying, Olivia. Weakness won't solve anything. Be strong. Move forward." My words, harsh despite good intentions, echoed my mother's quiet lessons. Strength through silence, dignity through emotional detachment. Olivia had internalized that harshness, absorbing my silent message that vulnerability equaled failure. Thomas, too, had experienced my emotional detachment. When he expressed doubt about taking over the business, his hesitance triggered old fears in me, fears rooted deeply in my upbringing. "You have no idea what sacrifice means, Thomas," I'd snapped harshly, voice sharper than intended. "I built this legacy for you, yet you treat it like a burden." I'd silenced his uncertainties, dismissing his feelings in favor of practicality, control. The emotional armor I'd worn for years had hardened into unintentional cruelty, wounds inflicted from my own unresolved pain. Now, recognizing these cycles clearly felt both liberating and agonizing. I had been wounded by my children's neglect, yet had unconsciously perpetuated emotional detachment onto them. The hurt I'd quietly suffered became a weapon I'd unknowingly wielded, perpetuating pain across generations. Anger mingled with profound grief, flooding through my veins, heavy and unrelenting. How had I missed the quiet cruelty I both suffered and inflicted? Tears blurred my vision as the weight of this realization pressed deeper. I had unknowingly carried the burden of generational trauma, handing it down silently, neatly wrapped in emotional distance, disguised as strength. My chest ached with profound regret, years wasted in quiet compliance, decades spent unintentionally perpetuating harm. The cycle felt suffocating, inescapable, yet the clarity sparked within me ignited a fierce resolve. If subtle cruelty had defined my family's emotional legacy, recognition was the first step toward change. The silence I'd endured and subsequently imposed had to end. My children had wounded me deeply, yet understanding how I contributed to our emotional fractures was equally painful. The generational cycle had thrived on silence and denial, but I could now choose differently. Acknowledging pain openly, confronting trauma honestly, rewriting our legacy through emotional authenticity. My anger settled into quiet determination. I owed it to myself, to Thomas and Olivia, even to my mother's quiet resignation, to break free from emotional neglect disguised as strength. Recognition was painful, yet necessary, a catalyst for healing long overdue. As dawn approached slowly, bathing the room in soft, golden hues, I felt strangely lighter. The path ahead promised difficulty, confronting ingrained patterns, facing uncomfortable truths, but the first crucial step had been taken. Recognition was clarity, clarity was power. No longer could I silently endure or inflict subtle emotional wounds. It was time to break the cycle, reclaim my voice, and rebuild relationships based on honesty, vulnerability, and genuine empathy. My children and I had wounded each other deeply through subtle neglect, but clarity offered the hope of genuine healing. I rose slowly, strengthened by newfound resolve. Emotional honesty would be my legacy now, a legacy of healing, strength through authenticity, and freedom from silence. In the aftermath of my painful realizations, distance became my refuge. I withdrew quietly from familiar spaces, stepping carefully away from the wreckage of my family's emotional turmoil. For the first time, isolation felt less like punishment and more like liberation, a sanctuary from the emotional chaos I'd unknowingly nurtured for decades. At first, solitude overwhelmed me, a vast emptiness echoing loudly. But slowly, carefully, I began reclaiming that emptiness, filling it intentionally with small acts of self-care, steps towards healing I'd neglected my entire life. Therapy became a lifeline, a space to unravel years of silence, pain, and inherited expectations. Dr. Lorraine Spencer was gentle yet firm, guiding me through buried traumas I had convinced myself no longer mattered. Every session felt exhausting yet liberating, peeling layers of suppressed emotions carefully and compassionately. "I've spent my life shrinking myself," I confessed to Dr. Spencer one rainy afternoon, the room gently illuminated by soft lamplight. My voice trembled slightly, emotions raw yet clear. "Always trying to please, never voicing my needs. It's exhausting, Lorraine." Her quiet nod reassured me. "Recognition is the first step, Abby. Now you begin the process of reclaiming yourself." Each session strengthened my voice, helping me understand that expressing vulnerability wasn't weakness but courage. Slowly, the weight of generational expectations began lifting, replaced by a quiet strength rooted in authenticity rather than silence. Outside therapy, I discovered simple pleasures I'd long ignored: morning walks in the crisp air, journaling my thoughts without self-censorship, cooking meals purely for my own enjoyment. Each action, small yet powerful, reclaimed my autonomy, piece by piece. One bright afternoon, sitting in a sunlit cafe sipping tea alone, I noticed a bookshop across the street. On impulse, I wandered inside, greeted by shelves filled with possibilities. As I browsed quietly, my fingers brushed a book on female empowerment and generational healing. Curiosity ignited. I flipped through pages filled with stories echoing mine, women silenced, diminished, but ultimately resilient. I took it home, devouring chapters, absorbing each powerful message. I wasn't alone. Generations of women had silently battled similar battles. Yet within that shared pain was profound strength. Inspired, I committed myself to living authentically, free from guilt or expectations. Days turned into weeks, and my newfound independence blossomed steadily. I began setting clear boundaries, respectfully yet firmly. When Thomas called demanding explanations, I calmly refused, holding space for my own emotional safety. Thomas, I'll talk when we're both ready, I gently asserted. His frustrated silence spoke volumes, yet my resolve didn't waver. Protecting my emotional well-being felt foreign, but empowering. Gradually, I embraced moments of strength and self-respect that reshaped my narrative. At a local women's support group, I shared my story openly, discovering comfort and encouragement in communal empathy. You're reclaiming your voice, Abby. Helen, a fellow participant, reassured me warmly after a session. It's powerful. You're rewriting your story. Her words resonated deeply. Rewriting my story felt monumental, yet essential. One particularly significant afternoon, I revisited my old house, now owned by strangers, its familiar facade painted differently, yet still painfully recognizable. Standing on the sidewalk, grief and anger resurfaced sharply. But instead of surrendering to these emotions, I allowed myself to grieve openly, unashamed. You were important, I whispered gently to the house, voice trembling yet strong. My memories matter, but losing you won't erase me. Letting go felt painful, yet necessary, a symbolic release of the weight I'd carried silently. With every tear shed, a new freedom emerged, rooted deeply in self-acceptance rather than quiet submission. My emotional resilience strengthened significantly, supported by deepening friendships with women who valued vulnerability as courage, strength through authenticity. Genuine connections taught me that emotional honesty fostered deeper relationships, something my family had struggled to understand. Months passed, and independence felt increasingly comfortable. Though moments of doubt arose occasionally, I consistently chose authenticity, prioritizing emotional health over pleasing others. Yet as healing progressed, subtle concerns about Thomas and Olivia resurfaced. Were they capable of similar growth? Could we eventually reconcile through genuine emotional honesty? These questions lingered, unresolved yet hopeful. One evening, sipping tea alone in my now peaceful home, my phone buzzed softly. The unexpected message from Olivia startled me slightly, anxiety and curiosity blending. Mom, can we talk? It's important. Heart quickening, I hesitated briefly before responding calmly. Yes. Tomorrow? Her prompt reply confirmed the meeting, sparking a mixture of hope and apprehension within me. The following day, Olivia arrived nervously, clearly conflicted. Sitting quietly across from me, eyes downcast, she hesitated before finally speaking softly, yet urgently. Mom, there's something you need to know, Olivia began, voice trembling noticeably. My heart clenched tightly, preparing for painful revelations. About the house. I never wanted to sell it. My breath caught sharply, surprise mixing with sudden confusion. Olivia, what do you mean? She finally lifted her eyes, shimmering with regret. It was Thomas's idea. He insisted it was the only sensible decision. I fought it, Mom. I argued, pleaded, but you know Thomas. He convinced me I was emotional, irrational, incapable of making decisions alone. I caved because I felt powerless. Her confession shifted everything. Family dynamics I believed firmly established suddenly blurred. My heart ached for her, for myself, for the emotional manipulation she'd silently endured, repeating my own history unknowingly. Olivia, I whispered softly, pain and empathy intertwined. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Her tears spilled openly, vulnerability finally unmasked. I thought you'd judge me for being weak, Mom. You always seemed so strong, unaffected by emotion. I was terrified you'd be disappointed. Her words struck deeply, illuminating yet another layer of generational damage. My emotional armor had unintentionally taught her shame and vulnerability, repeating patterns I desperately wanted to break. I'm sorry, Olivia, I admitted gently, voice filled with newfound emotional honesty. My strength was a shield, not true courage. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's bravery. I'm only now learning that. She nodded slowly, tentative hope flickering in her eyes. I want to break free too, Mom. I want authenticity, honesty, emotional freedom, not silence. Her determination echoed mine, filling me with cautious optimism. The cycle was breaking. Recognition brought genuine healing. I'm proud of you, I reassured her, heart swelling with pride and relief. We'll heal together. Her soft smile held profound gratitude, marking a turning point I hadn't imagined possible. a mother-daughter connection rooted in emotional truth rather than inherited silence. Yet, Olivia's revelation complicated everything profoundly. Thomas's role became clearer, darker, further damaging the fragile bonds remaining. His manipulation deepened my moral conflict, highlighting stark differences between my children, shifting blame, reshaping relationships profoundly. My journey of resilience and self-discovery had illuminated truths about myself. Now, new truths about my family emerged powerfully. Thomas had hidden deeper cruelty beneath practicality, while Olivia revealed genuine vulnerability. This revelation, though painful, further strengthened my resolve to reclaim authenticity, even as family dynamics shifted drastically beneath my feet. As days transformed into weeks after Olivia's revelation, my understanding of family shifted profoundly. The rigid lines of blood and obligation that once bound me felt looser, less defined, allowing space for new definitions rooted deeply in emotional honesty rather than genetic ties alone. The initial shock of learning Olivia's truth gradually gave way to a deeper awareness. Thomas's betrayal had severed bonds I once considered unbreakable, but it also provided clarity. Family wasn't merely about blood. True family stood with honesty, supported with compassion, and healed through empathy. Slowly, intentionally, I began reshaping my world around relationships that reflected these new truths. Friendships I'd once overlooked took center stage, offering stability and warmth previously absent in my life. Margaret, an old acquaintance whose presence had always felt quietly comforting, became an unexpected lifeline. One afternoon over coffee at her cozy home, sunlight spilling gently across worn oak tables, I finally shared my story openly, without fear or restraint. "Margaret, I've lost my family," I confessed softly, heart aching yet steady. Or maybe, I never truly had them, not emotionally, not fully. Her eyes softened, filled with genuine empathy as she reached gently across the table, hand warm and reassuring atop mine. "Family isn't always blood, Abby. Sometimes the most meaningful connections come from those who choose to love you honestly, authentically." Her words resonated deeply, offering comfort rooted in genuine understanding. "You're not alone. You're redefining family. That's courageous, Abby." Each conversation with Margaret strengthened my sense of belonging, reinforcing bonds built through intentional emotional honesty. Gradually, other friendships deepened similarly. Helen, from my support group, consistently offered unwavering encouragement, gently reminding me that emotional openness was strength. "Abby, you've created a family here," Helen reassured me warmly during a shared lunch, surrounded by laughter and genuine warmth from women who'd walked similar paths. "We've chosen each other, supported each other. This is real family, too." That moment, simple yet powerful, reshaped my understanding profoundly. Family wasn't merely an inherited obligation, it was a chosen circle of emotional honesty, trust, and genuine support. As I embraced this new definition, Olivia's presence lingered constantly at the edges of my healing journey, an unresolved ache filled equally with hope and caution. Her desire for reconciliation was genuine, yet complexities of our past demanded careful navigation. When Olivia reached out again, cautiously suggesting dinner, apprehension mingled with anticipation. I agreed, recognizing the opportunity to rebuild a healthier relationship. We met in a quiet, warmly lit restaurant, gentle ambiance easing initial tensions. Olivia appeared anxious, fingers nervously playing with silverware, uncertainty clear in her eyes. Our conversation started hesitantly, careful yet sincere. "Mom, I know my actions hurt you deeply," Olivia confessed softly, voice shaking slightly. "I understand now how deeply I misunderstood family. I prioritized keeping peace with Thomas over honesty with you. It's something I deeply regret." Her genuine remorse moved me, yet caution lingered. "I appreciate your honesty, Olivia," I responded gently, careful yet direct. "But rebuilding trust will take time. Our family can't heal through apologies alone. It requires ongoing honesty and emotional accountability." She nodded earnestly, visibly determined. "I want that, Mom. I genuinely want us to have an authentic relationship, something real, not hidden behind silence or resentment." Her words reflected my own longing clearly, easing my apprehension slightly. "It won't be easy," I warned softly. "Our family taught silence and compliance. Breaking that will be difficult, but I'm willing if you are." I am, Olivia confirmed, sincerity unmistakable in her steady gaze. Our conversation gradually shifted towards mutual understanding, carefully untangling years of misunderstood expectations. Olivia shared openly about her fear of disappointing me, shaped by years of unspoken expectations and subtle emotional distance. I always believed strength meant never burdening you, Olivia confessed softly, vulnerability evident. But I realize now genuine strength is openness. I want honesty between us, Mom. Her words echoed deeply, resonating powerfully with my own realizations. Honesty will define us now, Olivia, I promised gently yet firmly, our shared commitment offering cautious hope. Despite these strides forward, the shadow of Thomas's betrayal lingered, a painful yet unavoidable reminder of complexities within family bonds. Olivia's relationship with him remained complicated, torn between loyalty and the painful recognition of his manipulative behaviors. Thomas is struggling, Mom, Olivia shared cautiously, pain clear in her voice. He's angry, defensive, but he's still my brother. My heart tightened slightly, understanding deeply the complexities she faced. I won't ask you to abandon him, Olivia. Family connections are complicated. But protecting your emotional health matters too. She nodded thoughtfully, visibly conflicted yet appreciative of my empathy. Our family, fractured and reshaped by betrayal and truth, existed within delicate balances of loyalty and self-preservation. Navigating those complexities required patience, understanding, and continuous emotional honesty. Yet amidst these challenges, my growing community of friendships provided essential emotional grounding. Margaret and Helen's consistent encouragement helped me understand the power of chosen family. Relationships built intentionally through authenticity, emotional honesty, and genuine support. During one gathering at Margaret's home, surrounded warmly by friends who had become family, I felt deeply fulfilled, a sense of belonging I'd long craved yet rarely experienced. Our conversations, deeply personal and supportive, reflected genuine emotional honesty rarely found within traditional family structures I'd previously known. I never imagined family could feel like this, I shared softly, voice thick with gratitude and emotion. Margaret smiled warmly, eyes twinkling gently. You deserve it, Abby. You chose us and we chose you. That's true belonging. Her reassurance resonated deeply, solidifying my new understanding of family, built intentionally, emotionally nurturing, and unwaveringly supportive. In redefining family, I also redefined myself, strengthening my emotional resilience, prioritizing authenticity over pleasing others, and reclaiming my voice from generations of silence. This journey required courage, painful honesty, and continuous effort, but the rewards felt immeasurable. My relationship with Olivia, slowly rebuilding through cautious honesty, embodied this profound shift. Our bond, though still fragile, reflected newfound emotional depth and authenticity neither of us previously experienced within family dynamics. Thomas, however, remained distant, a stark reminder of complexities inherent within familial ties. His betrayal, though painful, provided crucial clarity, reinforcing the importance of intentional, emotionally supportive connections over blood-bound obligations. As I reflected quietly, surrounded by friendships that offered genuine emotional belonging, clarity crystallized powerfully. Family wasn't simply inherited, it was intentionally built, nurtured through honesty, empathy, and genuine love. Olivia's cautious return, complex yet promising, reflected potential for healing, while Thomas's distance reminded me clearly. Authentic belonging required honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect. The journey remained ongoing, complexities still present, yet I embraced newfound emotional clarity confidently, recognizing deeply the power of chosen family, honest relationships, and emotional authenticity as foundations of true belonging. The annual Hamilton Foundation Gala was always meant to symbolize unity and legacy. Tonight, the glittering ballroom of the Grandview Hotel seemed a cruel contradiction, mocking the fractured relationships barely held together by obligation. Elegantly dressed guests mingled effortlessly, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing beneath my composed exterior. From across the room, Thomas caught my gaze, sharp, piercing, defiant. Olivia stood hesitantly beside him, her expression guarded yet strained, clearly torn between loyalty and truth. A painful ache settled deep in my chest as we slowly converged toward one another, an inevitable confrontation masked beneath polite smiles. You came, Thomas acknowledged tersely, his voice stiff, barely hiding contempt. It's still our family's legacy, I replied calmly, steady despite my heart racing anxiously. I helped build it. I won't abandon it now. He scoffed quietly, bitterness seeping through his polished exterior. Funny, you seemed perfectly willing to abandon family when you sold our shares. Maybe you should have considered family before betraying me, I countered evenly, my voice firm yet controlled. He shook his head sharply, lips twisting bitterly. Everything is always about your feelings, isn't it, Mom? Never mind practicality or common sense. Your practicality destroyed trust, Thomas, I responded firmly, unwavering despite his growing hostility. Family isn't about convenience. It's about respect. You've consistently shown none. Thomas's jaw tightened visibly, his gaze darkening dangerously. Olivia shifted uncomfortably beside him, clearly conflicted, tension radiating from every subtle movement. I'm done apologizing, Thomas declared coldly, voice edged with anger. I won't be guilted over practical decisions. Olivia finally spoke softly yet clearly, cutting through the tense exchange. This wasn't practicality, Thomas. You manipulated me. You knew how much that house meant to Mom, and you didn't care. Thomas turned abruptly, eyes narrowing dangerously at her unexpected betrayal. Careful, Olivia, he warned coldly, voice controlled yet threatening. I won't be careful anymore, she asserted clearly, voice shaking slightly but determined. I let you pressure me once, I won't let you control me again. Her bravery steadied me, a swell of pride and pain intermingling sharply. Olivia's finally seeing clearly, I interjected gently, offering reassurance. Manipulation isn't strength, Thomas. It's weakness disguised as control. Thomas's rage simmered visibly beneath his carefully maintained facade. His voice dropped lower, colder, carrying a sharp edge. You've turned her against me. Is that your idea of family unity? No, Thomas, Olivia interjected sharply, stepping closer to my side defiantly. I finally found my voice. Mom helped me see truth. The truth you've hidden behind manipulation. You've chosen sides then, Thomas accused bitterly, voice filled with betrayal. You forced sides by disregarding everyone's feelings but your own, Olivia challenged sharply, her newfound confidence visibly unsettling him. Thomas glanced between us coldly, bitterness etched deeply into his expression. Congratulations, Mom. You've successfully poisoned Olivia's mind against me. You poisoned trust long ago, I countered firmly. Your choices, your manipulations broke us, not mine. Thomas shook his head furiously, barely contained anger radiating sharply. You sold our future, Mom. You took away something we built together. That's unforgivable. Just as you sold my past without a second thought, I returned bitterly, voice thick with unresolved pain. Family isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. You've refused to acknowledge your actions. You destroyed family, Mom. Thomas exploded finally, composure fracturing sharply. Guests glanced curiously, whispers rising subtly. Yet none intervened, sensing our confrontation's gravity. You abandoned family values, I countered firmly, unwavering despite mounting tension. Everything your father and I taught you, you discarded without hesitation. Olivia stepped forward gently, voice firm yet compassionate. Thomas, accountability isn't weakness. Mom's asking for acknowledgement, real acknowledgement, not silence, not deflection. Thomas's expression wavered briefly, pain surfacing beneath his anger. Yet his pride quickly smothered vulnerability. I don't owe anyone an apology, he declared fiercely, eyes dark with bitterness, especially not to someone who betrayed her own children. You're twisting everything again, Olivia argued sharply, frustration clear. Mom reacted out of deep pain, a pain we caused, Thomas. Selling our shares was wrong, but it was reactive, not manipulative like your actions. Pain doesn't justify sabotage, Thomas snapped, voice harsh, cutting deeply. And siding with her doesn't erase your own complicity, Olivia. I accept accountability, Olivia admitted softly yet clearly, courage shining through her voice. I've acknowledged my mistakes openly. You're refusing to do the same. Thomas shook his head bitterly, eyes narrowed with disbelief. You both stand here lecturing about accountability, yet refuse to see your own hypocrisies. You fractured our family, not me. I finally stepped forward gently yet decisively, voice steady, firm, filled with painful clarity. No, Thomas. You fractured us long ago. Family isn't built on lies, manipulation, or silence. It's built on truth, something you've consistently rejected. He met my gaze bitterly, silence thick with unresolved emotions. Truth? He scoffed bitterly. You want truth? Fine. I've already started legal proceedings against you, Mom. Fraud, embezzlement claims. I've arranged it all. You won't escape this without consequence. His revelation sliced through the ballroom sharply, an unexpected escalation igniting tension visibly. Olivia gasped softly beside me, horror mingling with disbelief. You planned legal retaliation? Olivia questioned incredulously, voice shaking with shock. How far will you go, Thomas? As far as necessary, he answered coldly, resolve evident yet chilling. This family won't heal until Mom faces real consequences. My heart thundered painfully, his words twisting harshly, escalating betrayal deeply. You've truly chosen vengeance, I whispered softly yet sharply, voice thick with pain. You've broken something irreplaceable, Thomas. He met my gaze unflinchingly, cold determination unwavering. You started this war, Mom. I'm simply ending it. Olivia stepped forward again defiantly, voice strong yet trembling slightly with emotion. You've destroyed us, Thomas. Not Mom. Your vengeance won't heal your bitterness. It'll only isolate you further. His eyes softened momentarily, brief vulnerability quickly replaced by harsh defiance. Isolation might be preferable to betrayal. My heart ached profoundly, realizing deeply the fracture within Thomas was likely irreparable. Yet despite escalating threats, emotional clarity steadied me powerfully. Your actions tonight proved everything, I finally spoke clearly, sadness mixing deeply with finality. Family requires trust, honesty, emotional integrity, qualities you've clearly abandoned. You've chosen isolation willingly. He hesitated briefly, uncertainty flickering briefly before bitterness hardened his expression once more. Enjoy your newfound family, Mom, built on illusions and denial. See how long it lasts. He turned sharply, storming away, leaving painful silence behind. Olivia grasped my hand gently, offering comfort amidst unresolved hurt. You stood strong, I reassured her softly, voice filled with pride yet heavy with pain. We both did, she affirmed quietly, gaze lingering sadly where Thomas had disappeared. I wish he'd chosen differently. Me too, I whispered honestly, heart aching profoundly. But he's made his choice. Now we live ours, honestly, openly, authentically. Her gentle nod confirmed our shared determination, emotional resilience clear despite lingering grief. Our family confrontation had painfully revealed irreparable fractures, yet also illuminated genuine strength, emotional honesty, and hopeful possibilities for healing beyond traditional bonds. As whispers resumed cautiously around us, I recognized clearly the monumental shift tonight represented, painful yet necessary. Thomas's betrayal escalated conflict dangerously, yet it clarified boundaries profoundly. Family could no longer be defined merely by blood. It required emotional honesty, genuine accountability, and mutual respect. Tonight marked painful endings, yet also hopeful beginnings, defined powerfully by truth, emotional authenticity, and the profound courage required to rebuild genuine family bonds from painful fractures. The legal battle was relentless, bitterly harsh, and emotionally draining, forcing every hidden resentment and painful truth to the surface. Thomas had aggressively pursued accusations of fraud and embezzlement, each claim meticulously calculated to punish me publicly. Yet the deeper we delved into the legal process, the more Thomas's own manipulations came under scrutiny, shifting the narrative sharply. Courtrooms were unforgivingly stark, amplifying tension with every appearance. I stood firm, supported by Olivia, whose quiet strength grew more evident daily. Thomas, initially confident, gradually began unraveling under relentless questioning, exposing fractures beneath his carefully constructed facade. One particularly significant day, the court buzzed quietly as Thomas took the stand, his composure visibly shaken by mounting evidence of his financial misconduct. My lawyer, Elizabeth Carter, approached him calmly, voice steady yet authoritative. Mr. Hamilton, can you explain why you diverted significant company funds into personal accounts labeled as business expenses? Thomas hesitated, frustration coloring his face. They were legitimate expenditures. Investments. Elizabeth's voice sharpened perceptibly. Yet financial records clearly demonstrate these investments benefited you personally, Mr. Hamilton. Isn't that correct? Thomas shifted uncomfortably, jaw clenching tightly, eyes narrowing. I handled finances responsibly. My mother's accusations are purely retaliatory. Then explain clearly, Mr. Hamilton, why these transactions were intentionally obscured from both the board and Mrs. Hamilton herself? The silence stretched painfully, Thomas visibly struggling for composure. His confident facade cracked under intense scrutiny. Perhaps my record-keeping was insufficient, but that doesn't equate fraud. Elizabeth pressed further, relentless yet composed. Insufficient record-keeping? Isn't it true you deliberately concealed financial actions to leverage control over family assets, including the unauthorized sale of Mrs. Hamilton's childhood home? Thomas snapped sharply, defensive anger flaring visibly. My mother is manipulating circumstances to villainize me. I acted practically for our family's financial stability. The judge's neutral voice interjected calmly, yet firmly. Please answer directly, Mr. Hamilton. Did you intentionally conceal financial activities to maintain control? His silence, heavy and revealing, spoke volumes. Thomas's calculated manipulations, once hidden behind practicality, were now exposed painfully, publicly, irrefutably. Each revelation further isolated him, supporters distancing themselves rapidly as truth unraveled clearly. Olivia beside me visibly struggled, yet remained resolute, recognizing deeply the necessity of public accountability. After the hearing, we exited quietly, hearts heavy with emotional exhaustion. Olivia reached gently for my hand, offering quiet comfort amidst turmoil. I never imagined we'd end up here, she admitted softly, voice thick with sadness. But Thomas forced this confrontation, Mom. He left no choice. My heart ached profoundly, understanding deeply her conflicted emotions. I know, Olivia, but accountability was essential for us and for Thomas. Her gentle nod confirmed understanding, emotional strength evident beneath visible grief. Will he ever recognize his mistakes, Mom? I hope so, I replied honestly, voice filled with cautious hope yet realistic acceptance. But Thomas must choose accountability. Until then, we rebuild ourselves. Rebuilding trust with Olivia required intentionality, careful yet honest communication replacing years of silence. We navigated emotional boundaries thoughtfully, openly addressing misunderstandings and past hurts. One afternoon in my living room bathed softly in afternoon light, Olivia expressed carefully yet openly, Mom, I struggle with boundaries, saying no, feeling guilty prioritizing myself. Her vulnerability resonated deeply, mirroring my own lifelong struggles. I understand, Olivia. Generational patterns taught us self-sacrifice equaled strength. We're learning differently now. She smiled softly, emotional gratitude evident. I'm grateful we're learning together, Mom. Honest communication feels unfamiliar but necessary. Each conversation deepened trust, carefully yet meaningfully, healing wounds gradually, intentionally. Together we set clear emotional boundaries, respecting individual autonomy while supporting genuine emotional openness. I'm learning emotional honesty is true strength, Olivia shared gently during another thoughtful conversation, vulnerability evident. I want healthy boundaries, emotional authenticity, not silence or resentment. Her words reflected profound emotional maturity, filling me with immense pride and cautious optimism. I'm proud of you, Olivia. We've both grown significantly. Our conversations consistently emphasized accountability and emotional authenticity, carefully untangling deeply rooted generational patterns. Olivia's emotional growth mirrored mine profoundly, reinforcing mutual respect, genuine empathy, and intentional emotional healing. Meanwhile, Thomas's isolation deepened significantly, his manipulations exposed clearly. Publicly ostracized, his circle rapidly dwindled, accountability now painfully unavoidable. Occasionally, reports surfaced highlighting his mounting bitterness, resentment increasingly evident. One evening, Margaret, consistently supportive through legal battles, shared thoughtful insight. Thomas's bitterness isolates him further. Accountability requires humility. He must choose it. Her observation resonated deeply, reinforcing clearly the necessity of genuine emotional accountability. Despite Thomas's hostility, my emotional growth enabled cautious empathy. Recognizing deeply his struggles originated from generational traumas we'd all inherited silently. Weeks later, during a quieter courtroom session, Thomas surprisingly requested private mediation, an unexpected yet cautiously hopeful development. Inside the neutral mediation room, tension palpable, Thomas spoke hesitantly, voice tight, yet visibly humbled. "I never intended things to escalate like this." Olivia responded gently yet firmly, emotional maturity evident. "Intentions matter less than impact, Thomas. We've all made mistakes, but accountability defines genuine family." His jaw tightened, struggling visibly against vulnerability. "I'm beginning to understand that." My voice softened compassionately, carefully balancing honesty with empathy. "Thomas, genuine healing requires honesty, emotional openness, humility, accountability." He hesitated significantly, visibly conflicted. "I've made serious mistakes. I recognize that now." Olivia's voice gently encouraged further vulnerability. "Recognition is important, Thomas, but accountability requires action. Public apologies, financial restitution, emotional humility." His silence lingered, pride visibly battling vulnerability. Finally, voice low yet sincere, he admitted cautiously, "I'll consider restitution, public acknowledgement, but trust takes time. I can't promise immediate healing." Olivia nodded thoughtfully, cautiously hopeful, yet realistically guarded. "We understand, Thomas. Healing requires ongoing effort from all of us." Our mediation ended cautiously, unresolved yet tentatively hopeful. Thomas's willingness toward accountability was fragile, yet his initial vulnerability offered genuine potential for gradual healing. Outside, Olivia and I shared quiet understanding, emotional exhaustion clear yet cautiously hopeful. "Thomas has a long road ahead," she admitted gently, "but tonight was significant." "Accountability begins with recognition," I affirmed softly, emotional clarity steadying me profoundly. "Thomas's willingness matters deeply." Olivia smiled gently, emotional resilience evident beneath lingering grief. "Our family's healing will be complicated, but I believe genuine emotional honesty offers hope." Together, we committed intentionally toward emotional authenticity. Cautiously optimistic Thomas would gradually embrace genuine accountability. Despite complexities, our emotional growth provided foundational strength necessary for ongoing healing. In redefining family through intentional emotional honesty, genuine accountability, and carefully established boundaries, our painful journey toward resolution deepened emotional resilience significantly. Trust rebuilt slowly yet meaningfully, boundaries respected thoughtfully, emotional authenticity prioritized consistently. Thomas's manipulations, publicly unraveled, forced introspection painfully yet meaningfully. His isolation, though heartbreaking, clarified essential boundaries powerfully. Accountability, now undeniably necessary, offered tentative potential for genuine healing, despite significant challenges. Our family's future remained cautiously hopeful, emotional authenticity firmly prioritized, genuine accountability central. Despite complexities, resolution emerged powerfully through honest communication, careful boundaries, emotional resilience, offering meaningful potential for genuine healing beyond painful fractures. The room was quiet, softly lit by warm sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains. The scent of lavender lingered faintly, grounding us in the safety of Dr. Spencer's office, a space that had witnessed so many of my rawest confessions. Today, though, the energy felt different. Olivia sat beside me, not across from me, her posture open, her expression sincere. We weren't just here to process pain. We were here to understand it, and possibly to release it. "I think I'm ready," I said quietly, glancing at Dr. Spencer, then at Olivia. "Ready to stop carrying everything alone?" Olivia's eyes shimmered gently. "I'm ready too. I've spent so much of my life trying to avoid hard conversations. It's time we have them." Dr. Spencer nodded, her voice calm. "When you both speak from the truth, not the version shaped by guilt or fear, healing begins." We sat with that, and then I began. "I haven't always been the mother you needed," I said, my voice tight with honesty but steady. "I thought protecting you meant preparing you to endure pain, not express it. I see now that I passed down silence and called it strength." Olivia blinked rapidly. I always admired you, Mom. You were so composed, so controlled. I thought that's what I had to be, but inside, I felt invisible. That truth, though quietly spoken, hit me harder than any accusation. I never meant for you to feel that way, I whispered. But I believe you, and I'm sorry. She reached for my hand. I believe you too, and I forgive you. It wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. Forgiveness wasn't fireworks. It was gentle, unspoken understanding. It was the soft sigh of two women who'd loved one another imperfectly and were learning to try again. Over the following weeks, our therapy sessions dug deeper. We explored our shared history not as victims and villains, but as two women shaped by generational patterns neither had chosen. I talked about my mother, about how she loved me with a kind of distant devotion that taught me how to survive, but never how to connect. Olivia shared how she'd always wanted my approval, not my instructions. I thought if I did everything right, you'd finally see me, she said one afternoon, tears brimming. But I never felt enough. You were always enough, I told her, voice cracking. I just didn't know how to say it in a language you could hear. These were the hard truths we had run from for years. But here, in this safe, quiet space, we spoke them out loud, and they stopped having power over us. Forgiveness wasn't instant. It came in pieces, through text messages sent after therapy, shared meals that no longer felt performative, phone calls where silence no longer felt heavy. We were learning how to be present with each other, learning how to trust. Dr. Spencer often reminded us, forgiveness isn't the erasure of pain. It's the choice to stop bleeding from the same wound. It helped. And then came the conversation we hadn't planned for, the one neither of us had rehearsed. Have you heard from Thomas? I asked one day, voice careful. Olivia nodded slowly. He called me last week. I waited, my heart heavier than I wanted to admit. He sounded small, she said. Not angry, just tired. I think he's starting to feel the consequences in a way he can't spin anymore. That landed hard. I thought of the boy I raised, the one with the big questions and fierce ambition. I thought of the man he became, hardened by pride, blinded by entitlement, and now apparently unraveling. Did he say anything about me? I asked quietly. Olivia hesitated. He asked if you hated him. My heart twisted painfully. I don't hate him. I'm hurt. I'm angry. But I don't hate him. He said he regrets how far it all went, that he doesn't know how to undo it. I nodded slowly. I don't know either, but maybe he doesn't have to undo it all. Maybe he just has to start owning it. Dr. Spencer encouraged us to sit with the discomfort, to not rush to fix anything, to honor the pain without clinging to it. Healing wasn't about perfect reunions. It was about understanding the truth and letting that truth guide what came next. When Olivia met with Thomas again, she invited me to join. I wasn't ready then. I told her to go ahead. A week later, she told me everything. He cried, Mom, she said softly. I haven't seen him cry since Dad's funeral. I didn't cry at first. I just felt heavy, like a door had opened inside me, but I wasn't sure what was on the other side yet. I'm not ready to see him, I admitted, but I'm not angry about him reaching out. That's enough for now, Olivia replied. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And she was right. Weeks later, I wrote Thomas a letter. I didn't apologize. I didn't ask for one. I simply told him the truth, that he hurt me deeply, that I had hurt him too, that I was willing to see who we could become if we both did the work. I didn't send it right away. I kept it on my nightstand, rereading it occasionally, adding to it, taking things out. It wasn't a gesture of forgiveness. It was an offering of possibility. Meanwhile, my relationship with Olivia grew stronger. We established rituals, Tuesday dinners, Sunday morning calls, therapy check-ins. We didn't force closeness. We allowed it to unfold. Do you think people ever fully heal? She asked me once. I think healing is like tending a garden, I said. It doesn't mean the storms never come. It means we know how to protect what we're growing. She smiled. Then we're learning. Forgiveness was no longer an abstract idea. It was action. It was commitment. It was choosing to speak gently, even when anger flared. It was choosing honesty, even when it hurt. And Thomas? His journey was his own. We didn't wait for him, but we left the door unlocked, and maybe one day he'd walk through it, not to fix what had been broken, but to begin something new. And that, I realized, was forgiveness in its truest form. Not erasing pain, not forgetting betrayal, but choosing to believe in the possibility of redemption anyway. The house was quiet, serene even. Not the childhood home I had lost, but the one I chose to create after everything fell apart. The sun spilled generously through the tall windows, dust dancing gently in the light. It was the kind of silence I had once feared, emptiness echoing unresolved pain. But now that same silence felt like space to breathe, to begin again. This morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a box marked Memories, the same one I had once shoved into a closet, too painful to confront. Inside were photos. My wedding day, the kids' first Christmas, a handwritten letter from my mother yellowed by time. I sat on the floor with them, the late morning sun warming my skin, and let the memories flood me. I cried, but not like before. These tears didn't burn with grief or betrayal. They were softer, necessary. I held a photo of young Olivia covered in frosting, and one of Thomas asleep on my chest, only days old. I let the love in. I let it remind me that I had been more than the pain, that my story hadn't been erased. It had only been interrupted. Later, I moved through the house with intention. In the guest room, I replaced the neutral art on the walls with a watercolor I had painted in therapy. Abstract swirls of gold and dark blue, like emotion made tangible. In the kitchen, I unpacked my grandmother's recipe cards, stained with use and memory, and arranged them carefully by the window. But the biggest change was in my bedroom. It had always been sterile. White walls, gray sheets, barely personal. It had reflected my years of self-erasure, a space that belonged to someone who wasn't allowed to take up emotional room. But today, I transformed it. I hung a quilt my mother made, one I'd buried in a storage box for decades because it reminded me too much of her coldness. But now, I saw it differently. It wasn't a relic of silence. It was her way of speaking in the only language she'd been taught, stitches instead of words. I laid it across my bed, smoothing each fold with reverence. When Olivia arrived that afternoon, she paused in the doorway of my bedroom, eyes widening slightly. "You kept the quilt." I nodded. "I'm learning to forgive her too." We sat on the bed for a while, just the two of us, not needing to speak immediately. Eventually, Olivia turned to me, her voice thoughtful. "Mom, I've seen you change so much. It's like you've come back to yourself." I smiled softly. "I think I'm finally meeting the version of myself that's been waiting all along." She nodded, then hesitated. "Do you ever miss who we used to be?" "Sometimes," I said honestly. "But mostly, I'm relieved. We don't have to pretend anymore. That version of us was polished, but it wasn't whole." She reached over, squeezing my hand. "I like this version better." I exhaled, feeling something deep inside me soften. Later that week, I visited the community garden where I'd started volunteering. It was a simple, earthy place, rows of herbs, wildflowers, and vegetables growing in harmony. I loved the rhythm of it, the pulling of weeds, the planting of new things. There was something deeply healing about putting my hands into the soil, grounding my grief and joy in something that could grow. As I pruned basil one afternoon, Margaret walked over with a basket of tomatoes. "You've got a peace about you these days," she said, her voice low and warm. "I've stopped hiding from my past," I replied. "Turns out it wasn't trying to hurt me. It was waiting for me to listen." Margaret smiled. "There's strength in facing it." That night, I sat at my kitchen table and began writing a letter, not to Thomas or Olivia or even to my mother. It was addressed to myself. "Dear Abby, you have carried enough. You have fought battles with silence and you have bled through smiles. But you are not broken. You are reborn. You are allowed to take up space, to speak, to want, to feel. You are allowed to heal." It was the letter I'd needed my entire life. In therapy the next day, I read it aloud. Dr. Spencer listened quietly, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You've taken your power back, Abby," she said. "Not by controlling others, but by loving yourself through the chaos." That statement sat with me. It rewrote the definition of strength I'd lived by for so long. I had always thought strength meant endurance. surviving pain in silence. Now I knew. True strength was showing up to the pain, holding its gaze and saying, "You don't own me anymore." I didn't know what would happen with Thomas. I knew he was in therapy, that he'd stopped trying to control the narrative, that he'd begun to feel the consequences in ways that were changing him. Olivia told me he'd started journaling, that he'd cried during a session, that he'd admitted he missed me. I wasn't ready to see him yet, but I didn't hate him. And maybe one day, we would sit in a room together and I would tell him what I'd told myself, that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering without reliving. As spring approached, I planted a small magnolia tree in the front yard. It wasn't a replacement for the past, but a marker of what could still bloom. I named it Hope, not because I needed everything to be perfect, but because I had finally learned that hope wasn't about outcomes. It was about beginnings. Under the magnolia tree, I placed a small stone with a single word etched into it: enough, because I was. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. The seasons had shifted again. I could feel it in the crisp morning air, in the way the light filtered through the window with a softer hue. Autumn was coming, brushing golden fingertips across the leaves outside. Change was no longer something I resisted. It had become something I welcomed, something I had learned to trust. I sat on the porch with a blanket across my lap, a warm mug of tea in my hands. Olivia had left only minutes earlier, her goodbye kiss still fresh on my cheek, her laughter still echoing in the air. We'd spent the weekend sorting through old photo albums, something we once avoided for fear of resurfacing too much grief. Now we opened those pages willingly, with reverence and curiosity instead of dread. "Do you remember this?" she had asked, pointing to a faded photo of her 8th grade graduation. I had smiled, remembering the way her hands had trembled as she held her certificate, and how she had buried her nerves beneath a composed smile, so much like mine. "Yes," I had whispered, "I remember everything." These moments were the markers of our healing, small rituals that helped build a new foundation. Not perfect, not painless, but real. As I watched the leaves stir in the breeze, I found myself reflecting not just on the past year, but on the decades before it. So much of my life had been shaped by obligation, by quiet suffering disguised as devotion. I had carried burdens inherited from women who came before me, women who whispered strength through silence and survival through suppression. Now I knew better. Self-empowerment, I'd learned, didn't come in a burst. It came in small choices, choosing to speak when it's easier to stay quiet, choosing to feel instead of suppress, choosing to show up for yourself when no one else does. I had begun doing all of that, and while it hadn't erased the wounds of my past, it had transformed them. My relationship with Olivia had become one of shared truth. We didn't pretend anymore. We didn't tiptoe. If something hurt, we said so. If something felt good, we said that too. The emotional honesty I once feared was now the backbone of our connection. "I feel like I can breathe around you now," she told me recently. "Not because you're different, but because I am." Her growth was a gift I had never dared to hope for, and it reflected my own. Thomas, on the other hand, remained distant. Our last conversation had been brief but meaningful. He had called late one evening, his voice hesitant but clear. "I'm still working through it," he had said. "I'm not ready for reconciliation, but I'm not angry anymore." It was enough. He had begun therapy. Olivia told me he was confronting his own patterns, his need for control, his fear of emotional vulnerability, his resentment. I didn't ask for more than that. For the first time, I allowed him the space to figure it out on his own terms. I wasn't trying to fix it. I wasn't carrying it. I had put it down. What I carried now was purpose. For so long, I had measured my worth through sacrifice, through what I could give away. Now I measured it by what I could rebuild, not just for myself, but for the women who would come after me. I had begun volunteering at a local women's center. Every Wednesday afternoon, I sat with women in all stages of transformation, some fresh from heartbreak, others emerging from years of suppression. I didn't offer answers. I offered presence. Sometimes I shared my story, not the curated one, but the real one. The pain, the mistakes, the slow crawl toward healing. You don't have to be unbreakable, I told them. You just have to be honest. And I meant it. One young woman named Clara, barely 25, looked at me with wide eyes one afternoon. "You make healing sound possible." "It is," I said, "but not perfect." You'll still grieve. You'll still have bad days, but you'll survive them with your whole self intact. At home, I began writing more seriously. Not just in my journal, but pages that might one day become a book, a memoir maybe, or letters to my grandchildren. I didn't know yet, but I knew I wanted to leave something behind, something more than silence and shame, something rooted in resilience, emotional truth, and the promise that we can always begin again. I wrote about my mother and how I forgave her. I wrote about John and how love is often not enough if it isn't accompanied by understanding. I wrote about Olivia and the strength it takes to unlearn, and about Thomas and the pain of recognizing yourself in someone you can't reach. Mostly I wrote about myself. Not the version shaped by others, but the woman I had become. I had stopped asking what others needed me to be and started asking what I needed to become. That shift had changed everything. One morning, Olivia joined me for a walk along the river trail. The leaves were beginning to turn, and the path crunched beneath our feet. "You seem lighter," she said. "I am," I replied. "I stopped trying to carry things that were never mine." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I want to raise my future children in a home where honesty doesn't feel dangerous." "You will," I said with certainty, "because you've already broken the pattern." That moment stayed with me long after the walk ended. It was the clearest confirmation I had ever received that the legacy I was rewriting mattered. I didn't need my name on buildings or my portrait in boardrooms. My legacy would be in the way my daughter showed up for herself, in the stories I left behind, in the silence I refused to pass down. As the sun dipped below the trees that evening, casting long golden shadows across the porch, I breathed deeply. Not to brace myself for what was coming, but to feel what was here. This was closure, not a closing of the book, but the end of a chapter. And forward momentum wasn't about rushing. It was about choosing every step with intention, knowing that healing wasn't linear, but always possible. I rose from the chair and walked inside. Tomorrow, I'd write again. Maybe just a few pages, maybe just a single sentence. But it would be mine. And this time, it wouldn't begin with someone else's expectations. It would begin with my own name. Abby Hamilton, daughter, mother, survivor, healer. Enough. If this story struck a chord, it's because the quiet cracks in families often echo the loudest. Dive deeper with us into the untold, the uncomfortable, the real. Every story we tell unearths truths we're all living but rarely naming. Stay close. There's more where this came from.